Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
My fiance and I have this tradition of going out for a nice dinner every other weekend, followed by grocery shopping at our local supermarket. I know it sounds weird, but it actually works great for us. We're already out, dressed up, and the store is usually pretty quiet in the evening. This night, we had just finished an amazing Italian dinner celebrating my recent promotion at work. I was wearing my favorite power outfit, a black jacket, black skirt, and heels that I'd splurged on to mark the occasion. My fiancé looked equally sharp in his button-up shirt and black slacks. We have this system at the store where we split up to get through our shopping list faster. It's become a bit of a game. Whoever finishes their half of the list first gets to pick the dessert for the week. I was in the pasta aisle contemplating whether to try the store brand mac and cheese instead of the name brand when I heard someone clearing their throat aggressively behind me. I ignored it at first, but then came the stomping and more throat clearing. Still, I kept my focus on the mac and cheese comparison. That's when she started yelling, trying to get my attention by calling out to Lady and then demanding the manager. When I finally acknowledged her, I explained that I wasn't a manager and asked if she needed help with something. She responded by insisting that I must be a manager because of how I was dressed and demanded to know which soups were part of the 10 for $10 sale. I tried explaining again that I didn't work there, suggesting she look at the signs that clearly marked which soups were on sale. This only made her angrier, and she started yelling about what my problem was. When I pointed out that she was the one yelling, things escalated quickly. This woman, probably in her 60s, actually stomped over to me, wagging her finger in my face like I was a misbehaving child. She went on this tirade about customer service, my job responsibilities, and everything that's wrong with young people these days. She threw in some threats about getting me fired, but honestly, I started tuning her out at that point. I tried one more time to direct her to the actual store employees for help, explaining again that I was just another customer. She accused me of lying, insisting that my outfit was clearly a manager costume, and tried to continue her rant. When I attempted to interrupt, she actually smacked my hand, making me drop the box of mac and cheese I was holding. The situation devolved into her proudly admitting she hit me because I had interrupted her and me yelling at being assaulted. My fiancé heard the commotion and came running. When he asked what was happening, I explained that this woman had hit me because she wouldn't believe I wasn't an employee. Karen immediately started demanding that he fire me for not doing my job. My fiancé asked her if she really thought everyone dressed nicely was a manager. Her response was to point out that she had seen me putting items back on shelves earlier. I snapped back, explaining that I was simply deciding not to buy something, calling her a dumb weirdo in the process. She got even more outraged at my disrespect. I asked my fiancé to get a real manager, announcing my intention to call the police. Karen started shouting about being a paying customer, to which my fiancé and I simultaneously reminded her that we were customers too. When the actual manager arrived wearing his proper uniform with badge and name tag, Karen launched into her complaints again, proudly admitting to hitting me like it was perfectly justified. The manager had to explain to her, speaking very slowly as if to a child, that managers wear specific uniforms with badges and name tags just like he was wearing. He pointed out that we were clearly just customers who happened to be dressed nicely. Karen's response was to insist that I deserved to be hit for talking back to her. The manager looked completely done with the situation. I asked him to tell Karen that if she didn't apologize, I wanted him to call the police to report the assault. Her final response was to screech like a banshee, throw a can on the ground, and then sweep her arm across the shelf, sending an avalanche of soup cans crashing to the floor before waddling out of the store. The aftermath was actually pretty satisfying. Security footage caught everything, including her assault and the property damage. The manager filed a police report, and we gave our statements. Turns out she was a regular troublemaker at the store, and this incident was the final straw. She got banned from all locations of the chain in our area and she had to pay for all the damaged merchandise. We helped clean up the soup can mess, despite the manager insisting we didn't have to, and he gave us a $30 gift card for our trouble. My fiance and I still joke about my manager costume whenever we dress up for date night now. It was the summer of 1985 and I had spent months planning what I thought would be the adventure of a lifetime. Backpacking through Europe with my closest friend from university. We'd known each other for 3 years, studied together, shared countless meals and conversations. I trusted him completely. The first 2 weeks were exactly what I had dreamed of. We explored ancient cities, tried new foods, met interesting people from all over the world. We watched street performers in Paris, got lost in the winding streets of Amsterdam, and marveled at the architecture in Munich. That night we boarded an overnight train heading south. Our sleeping car had 6 bunks, but when evening came, the other 4 passengers went to the dining car for a late dinner. I was tired from our day of sightseeing and decided to try to sleep instead. I was almost dozing off when I felt his hand on my leg. At first I thought he was trying to wake me up for something important. Or maybe it was an accident. When I asked him what he was doing, he replied with a sleazy comment about how I wanted this too. I told him to stop and that it wasn't funny, but he just accused me of pretending, saying we both knew better. I pushed his hand away, but he kept reaching for me. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I raised my voice, telling him to stop and get away from me. He just called me a prude and pointed out that we were alone. I begged him repeatedly to stop, telling him this wasn't right. I fought back tears as I tried to push him away, but he was stronger than me. The only thing that saved me was the sound of voices and footsteps approaching our car. He immediately moved back to his bunk as if nothing had happened. I lay there all night, unable to sleep, trying to process what had just happened. My mind kept spinning in circles. This was my friend, someone I trusted. There must have been some misunderstanding. Maybe I had given him the wrong impression somehow. The next morning he acted completely normal. We checked into a hostel, stored our backpacks in a shared locker, and headed into town. My stomach was in knots, but I finally worked up the courage to bring up the previous night's events. When I mentioned what happened on the train, he reacted with exasperation. He turned everything around, accusing me of being the one who kept touching him and wouldn't take no for an answer. When I protested that this wasn't what happened at all, he suggested we forget about it, but added that I should think about how I act around guys, claiming I send mixed signals sometimes. I felt like I was going crazy. Had I imagined the whole thing? But no, I could still feel his hands on me, still hear his voice, still remember the fear. I excused myself to use the bathroom, saying I'd be right back. When I walked away, everything suddenly became crystal clear. He had assaulted me, and now he was trying to make me doubt my own reality. Well, I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I went straight back to the hostel. When I explained to the front desk clerk that we needed to cut our stay short, they were sympathetic. They confirmed both rooms had been paid in cash and asked if I was authorized to handle both checkouts. I assured them I was. I pocketed both refunds, knowing the rooms would be filled within minutes in the peak tourist season. I went to our locker and took out both backpacks. I removed all our shared supplies from his pack, the food we'd bought together, the guidebooks we'd split the cost of, and most importantly, the Thomas Cook train schedule book. In 1985, that book was worth its weight in gold for travelers. Without it, you were basically traveling blind. I left his backpack on a bench, took one last look around, and headed for the train station. But I had one more thing to do first. I found an international phone booth and dialed his mother's number. I introduced myself, explaining that I was traveling with her son and that there was something she needed to know about what he did last night. I told her everything. After a long silence, her voice shook with rage as she assured me she would deal with him when he got home. I hung up, bought a ticket to the furthest point I could reach, Lisboa, Portugal, and boarded the next train. When the hostel clerk had tried to hand me both passports, I'd refused his. I might have been angry, but I wasn't going to stoop to theft. I spent the rest of my trip traveling alone, meeting wonderful people, and having amazing adventures. Sometimes I imagined his moment of realization when I didn't return from the bathroom, his panic when he found himself without a room, without supplies, without his precious train schedule book. And finally, the phone call from his furious mother. It wasn't the trip I'd planned, but it taught me something valuable about myself. I was stronger than I knew, and I didn't need anyone else to have the adventure of a lifetime. When I was a kid, I loved adventure. I grew up in a quiet neighborhood with a forest nearby, so I spent most of my time climbing trees and exploring. My parents liked that I played outside instead of watching screens all day. I was also really good at it because I had done gymnastics for 5 years, which made me strong and balanced enough to climb even the tallest trees safely. That summer when I was 15, I had a favorite spot in the woods where 3 massive oak trees grew close together, creating this perfect natural climbing structure. I'd go there almost every day after finishing my homework, sometimes spending hours just sitting in the branches, reading or watching the sunset. One Saturday afternoon in July, I was heading back home from my usual climbing session. My clothes were a bit dirty from the bark and my hands had some scrapes. Nothing unusual for me. When I walked down the familiar sidewalk that connected the woods to our neighborhood, I noticed some kids setting up a lemonade stand in front of their house. It was a pretty hot day, and I was pretty thirsty from all the climbing, so I figured I'd check out their prices. Just as I approached the stand, one of the kids running it went inside their house to get something. I decided to wait since I was in no hurry. That's when I spotted her, a woman in expensive-looking jogging clothes, power walking toward the stand with that typical "I want to speak to your manager" haircut. She got to the stand, barely acknowledging my presence, and asked me in that sickly sweet voice entitled, "People often use if she could get a glass of lemonade." I explained to her that this wasn't my lemonade stand, and that I was just waiting to buy some myself. She acted like she hadn't heard me and kept staring expectantly. I started to walk away, not wanting to deal with whatever this was. She cleared her throat loudly and repeated her demand for lemonade, this time with a bratty tone that made my skin crawl. I turned back around, trying to be patient, and explained again that this wasn't my stand, that I didn't work here, and that the kid who runs it just went inside for a minute. That's when things got scary. She literally grabbed my shirt, just reached out and grabbed it, pulling me back to the stand. She started yelling at me, insisting that I worked there and demanding that I get her lemonade, calling me a brat in the process. I was terrified. This woman was clearly unhinged, and she had her hands on me. I did the only thing that made sense. I yanked myself free and ran. I could hear her screaming behind me, but I didn't look back. I just ran straight home, my heart pounding in my chest. Once I got home, I locked myself in my room and tried to calm down. I told myself it was over, just another crazy person story I could tell my friends later. But about 15 minutes later, I heard knocking at our front door. I peeked out my window and my stomach dropped. It was her. She must have followed me or asked around the neighborhood. I could hear the conversation from my room. She asked my mom if she was the mother of this brat. When my mom asked how she could help, Karen accused me of assaulting her and refusing to serve her lemonade. My mom, confused, told her that I wasn't selling lemonade and explained that the stand belonged to the family down the street, mentioning that she had bought some from them just yesterday. That's when Karen changed her story, stammering that I had touched her instead. That's when my mom lost it. I'd never heard her this angry before. She started yelling at Karen, calling her out for following her child home, making up lies about me working at a lemonade stand, and then making false accusations about assault. She told Karen she should be ashamed of herself and pointed out how serious those accusations were. My mom told her that I was probably terrified and that Karen was the one who should be reported for harassing a minor. I heard my mom slam the door so hard the windows rattled, followed by all 3 locks clicking into place. Through my window, I could see Karen standing there, mouth hanging open like a fish. She stood there for a few more seconds before finally walking away, her face red as a tomato. Later that evening, I found out from my mom that she had called the police non-emergency line to report the incident, just in case Karen tried anything else. She also walked down to the lemonade stand and told the kids' parents what happened. They ended up installing a security camera on their porch the next day, pointing it toward their driveway where they set up the stand. I still climbed in the woods after that, but I took a different route home for the rest of the summer. I never saw Karen again, but sometimes when I pass by a lemonade stand, I still get a little nervous. At least now I can laugh about having my very own encounter with an entitled person who thought they could bully a teenager into serving them lemonade that wasn't even theirs to sell. I'm a 17-year-old girl who used to work at a local hobby store until about 6 months ago. The job was pretty straightforward. I stocked shelves, cleaned up after customers who would test markers on random surfaces, and worked as a cashier a few nights each week. It wasn't much, but it helped me afford basic necessities and personal items. I had to quit because of some personal issues that came up in November. Last Monday, I decided to visit the store to get some art supplies. My therapist had recommended an art project, and I thought it would be a good way to test how I felt about going out in public again. I was wearing my comfort clothes, a big black hoodie and baggy sweatpants, nothing that would make anyone think I worked there. I had my earbuds in but wasn't playing any music. They just helped muffle the noise around me. While I was looking at drawing pads, I heard the distinct sound of heels clicking on the floor. The sound stopped and a shadow fell over me. I could feel myself beginning to sweat. Then she called out to me with an impatient, "Excuse me." Her tone wasn't too bad. Yet, I acknowledged her and she asked about the location of painting cups for porcelain Christmas villages. She was polite enough at first, so I simply told her I didn't know where they were. That's when her attitude changed completely. She started insisting that I did know where they were, her voice getting increasingly aggressive. I stepped back, starting to shake, and told her that I didn't work there. She wouldn't believe me, claiming she remembered me helping her last Halloween. She demanded that I stop lying and tell her where the paints were. By this point, I was having a panic attack. I tried explaining that I hadn't worked there for 6 months and that the store had been rearranged since then. She launched into a rant about how kids these days are lazy and take advantage of the worker shortage, thinking they can't get fired for being rude to customers. She threatened to get my manager and have me fired. I dropped the supplies I was holding and tried to leave. I wasn't crying, I just needed to get away from this woman. That's when she grabbed me. When she spun me around to face her, she started jabbing her finger in my face, while screeching so loud it pierced through my earbuds. Then everything went black. When I regained consciousness, paramedics were checking on me. Police officers were there too, and Karen was in handcuffs, still causing a scene. She kept insisting she hadn't done anything wrong and was calling me crazy, even suggesting it was ridiculous that the store would hire crazy people. I ended up being taken to the hospital. Karen is being charged with assault, though I'm still waiting to hear more about that since this just happened a few days ago. After reading the police report and talking to my former co-workers, I learned what happened during my blackout. Apparently, when Karen grabbed me, I collapsed to the ground in a fetal position, repeatedly whimpering that I didn't work there. Some customers saw what was happening and got the manager, while someone else called emergency services. Karen just stood there, opening and closing her mouth like a fish, continuously denying that she had touched me. I spent one night in the hospital and had a session with my therapist afterward. Now I'm back home waiting for my Amazon delivery with the art supplies I originally went to get. At least nowadays you can get almost anything delivered to your door. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.